Welcome to Chapter 3, Part 1. We're going to talk about the ethical requirements for research. Basically, to be a good human being, right? First, do no harm. Make sure that you're being respectful and careful. Sometimes this is really clear, and sometimes it's really not. Working with human subjects is tightly controlled. In the United States, currently, there are a lot of rules, as there are worldwide. Um, Institutions that do research, like universities and colleges, but also hospitals, school systems, sometimes research institutes, are required to have what's called an institutional review board. And you cannot publish anything that involves human subjects, that involves people, that has not gone through an IRB. There are very good reasons why we do this, and that's because there have been historical abuses. There have been terrible things, such as Nazi prisoner experiments during World War II, such as the Tuskegee syphilis study, where the U.S. government knowingly pretended to be treating Black men in rural areas in the South who had syphilis while not actually giving them treatment. We had a treatment, it's antibiotics, and we didn't give them antibiotics, and the government allowed this study to go on in order to study the progression of syphilis. And that is, it went on for decades, and it was completely unethical by today's standards, at least. And I would argue by then standards as well. But anyway, there's been other egregious things that have been found to be too manipulative, too hurtful, too risky to the people who participate in it. There's a lot of research in psychology about the Milgram experiments, about the Stanford prison experiment. There's a bunch of things people generally agree were not okay, and we cannot just say, well, it's for science, so that makes it okay. Right? The Belmont report came out of the sort of awareness after World War II, the next couple of decades, as we started doing lots of social science research in particular, that we needed to, it wasn't just medical research, it was all kinds of research that involved people that we need to be careful about. And the Belmont report had three principles. First, respect for people, their autonomy, their ability to make their own decisions, their ability to, process information in order to make those decisions. Beneficence, trying to be good to people and good for society, right? That there should be some reason why your research is going to have a benefit that outweighs the risks that may be to the people participating. And then lastly, justice. It's not okay to only study men, which has happened for some studies, right? It's not okay to only study white people. It's not okay to only study affluent people. We need to be studying people of color. We need to be studying women. We need to be studying people of diverse gender identities and sexualities, right? So that all of the medical treatment or psychological treatment or communication ideas and knowledge that we generate isn't just about a very elite and very specific group of people. It needs to be about everybody, and that's justice. The IRB process has a bunch of requirements. The first one is that you have to undergo training. This is now generally done using a webinar format. Faculty, staff, and students, anybody involved must first go through this. And and other faculty members are required to periodically update it. Every couple of years, I have to go through an extended version of the training. Application process for research is very complex. It requires a lot of detail about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're planning to do it, who it would involve, and a justification for that. There's levels of review, meaning sometimes things can be expedited. It can go through fairly quickly. It only needs a check because you're just going to interview people about their friendships, or it might need a really full review, a very, very careful review. You're going to actually have people engage in an experiment that involves them to not unacceptable risk, but some risk. And then you're going to take a blood sample from them afterward in order to check the levels of cortisol and how that which is stress hormone, and see how that has to do with the particular type of communication they were subjected to. Of course, there's also things that are exempted. If you're only looking at streaming TV that is publicly available, you don't need permission for that. Social media is in the middle. Sometimes you do need permission, sometimes you don't. There's ethical reasons because it can be traced back with exact quotes to specific people. So there are issues with using social media that can be complicated. The other big issue about this is informed consent. The informed consent process is essential for any research involving humans. And that means the person must truly be informed, and they must truly give consent. What does that mean? Well, first, informed means they have to be given enough information to understand what they're signing up for. Doesn't mean there can never be any deception and then you later debrief them on it, but it does mean they have to have to understand. You're asking them to be interviewed for 30 minutes, you're asking them to engage in an experiment and then have a saliva sample or a cortisol blood sample, or you're just going to ask them to fill out a survey at the end, or you're just going to ask them to fill out a survey, period, right? Whatever it is, they need enough information on it. Secondly, that information must be in an appropriate language that they understand and a format that they can interact with. So, for example, when I was studying senior citizens with cancer, I was required to have all the informed consent forms in a larger point font because many senior citizens have decreased visual acuity. They can't see as well. So that needs to be in a bigger font to make sure they can read it, that kind of thing. Secondly, like with sex, real consent must be given. What does that mean? Well, it means it's informative. An absence of a no is not a yes. There has to be an actual yes, an affirmative yes. Secondly, the person has to have the capacity to make the decision. So drunk people cannot give consent. Otherwise, very impaired, very, very ill people, which sometimes is complicated for me because I study people in the healthcare system, they can't give consent or may not be able to give consent. People with developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities can't. Children are not seen as being able to give consent. They do need to give it orally, verbally, but they must have a guardian. Same thing with people with developmental disabilities. A guardian or somebody else has to also say that it's okay. Also, it cannot be given under fear of punishment. So, for example, when I wanted students to agree to use some of the artful and incredible creative projects they made in my class as data, like if I want to do a study that I'm intending to be published, then I need to have informed consent where there's no fear of punishment to you that you would lose points, right? That the student would somehow get a lower grade. So I have to say, nope, very clearly, you're not going to lose any points if you don't want to. If I'm giving you extra credit, here's another way you could also earn that same extra credit. So there can't be any fear of punishment involved. Otherwise, it's not truly consent.